Hello YouTube, this is my second video and I'm going to try to show you something very similar to my first video. In my first video I took a primary arms first focal plane scope, a very low cost, under $300 scope. Actually the original one is down as low as almost $200 now, and I showed how to use a nylon washer to basically allow you to create a zero stop. And that was the washer that we use several of them depending on how far you have to go. In any case, I'm going to do the same thing today, and in this case I have another moderate price scope, not expensive. This is the SWFA 3-15x42, again, front focal plane or first focal plane scope. There's the SWFA logo, and there's the actual information on this particular scope. In any case, same thing. I went out to the range and I zeroed this rifle at 100 yards. Obviously, you zero it wherever you're comfortable with. For me, it was 100 yards. But now my zero has to be adjusted, and I can adjust the zero, and I will do that. The problem is that once I adjust that zero, this particular scope does not have a zero stop. So it turns out with the right tools, actually the right washers, I was able to create a zero stop for this rifle as well. So I'm going to show you how the process works. It's very simple. There are 3 retaining screws on the top of the turret. And again, this has been zeroed at 100 yards. So I'm going to remove these 3, or at least loosen them quite a bit, because what we're going to do is once they're loosened, we're going to actually lift the turret cap off of the turret itself. And basically, it will allow us to then move this thing. Actually, I don't think I need to lift this one. I think I could just turn it once it's loose, and there's no clicks. So I can turn this, but I need to zero this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this off completely, fairly straightforward, comes off, and I'm going to take a different washer this time. Again, also from non-ferrous fasteners. I recommend using nylon because, again, if you put some torque on these will give a little bit. If you use a steel washer, you may actually damage the scope turret or the the turret housing. So I wouldn't recommend that. So I recommend these soft nylon fasteners. So in this case, again, I ordered these online. They were very inexpensive. Unfortunately, I think I had to buy 100 of them. In any case, it turns out I need 2 of these. So I've got 2 here, and this is as simple as it gets. All I'm going to do is drop these, and by the way, these are very important because there is on the underside of the turret cap, try and get a focus on that, there's a fairly large offset right in the center there. These washers need to go around that offset, okay? This thing needs to seat down within those washers. So that's why these washers have the large inner diameter. But in any case, we set these on top of the turret housing, and then we basically take our turret cap. I'm going to turn it over and lay it on top of this, but of course I'm going to move my zero, which is now the rifle is zeroed. I apologize for all the movement there. The rifle is now zeroed at 100 yards. So I'm going to drop this cap down right on top of there. And this one has a little bit of a resistance, like an air pressure or something because of the O-rings. So you have to actually hold this down. So get your zero lined up, hold this down, and then while you're holding it down, gently tighten all 3 screws. And then once the screws are basically, mostly tight, and the cap is being held in the down position, again, overcoming that air pressure, that resistance. Once that's done, then you can go ahead and tighten these up tight. And now what you'll see, just like with the primary arms scope, what you'll find now, and I apologize, I'm having trouble getting to this front one from the back side. In any case, so we'll tighten the 3rd screw down. Okay, now I'm going to tighten them so they're tight. Don't go too tight. You don't want to strip the screws. Just make sure all 3 are tight so they don't work themselves out with the shock of the gun. And now, when I move this turret, watch what happens. right there, it locks. It basically won't go any further. Now I could force it, but ultimately with a couple of mils past the 0, I've got a 0 stop. So again, just like the primary arm scope, we've now taken the SWFA Super Sniper scope, and with using these fasteners, we've successfully created a 0 stop. Now, that said, I want to show you one little tidbit here that's important. These fasteners are fairly thick. The fasteners that I used in the in the primary arms were about half the thickness. And if you can find a fastener that has the same inner diameter and outer diameter as this part number, again, there's the part number again. If you can find one with the correct ID and OD, but thinner, half the thickness, I would recommend it, because the problem with this thickness is, I was lucky. I put 2 of these in this particular application, and I was able to get almost a perfect 0 stop. But if you could go to half this thickness, it'll be a little more forgiving depending on your particular needs to make that 0 stop as close as possible to a 0. I personally like a little bit of overshoot, but I don't want to go more than maybe 1 or 2 mils past the 0 point. I don't need to stop right at 0. I'm not worried about being that precise. But I would like to basically get as close as I can, maybe about a mil and a half overshoot. The problem is with these being this thick, you put 1 on and it might be not enough. You put 2 on, it could be too much. So if you can find a part number, and this happened to be the one I ordered, and when they came in I realized how thick they were. But if you can get one that's more like a 0.03 thickness instead of 0.06, let me check, I think that's inches. I think I've got my scale in inches here. Yeah. So this thin one from the primary arms application was 0.03 inches approximately, and this is 0.06 inches. So effectively, if you could get a thinner model of the same washer, nylon fastener, nylon washer, then you could basically have a little more forgiveness in the 0 stop. So in any case, that simple change gives you a 0 stop for this first focal plane scope, the SWFA Super Sniper 3-15x42. Thank you.